Ares is the well-known god of war and destruction, but does he actually pull his weight in Hades? Hello and welcome to this Hades beginner guide all about using Ares in Hades. Now, Ares is what I would call a magic focus god in that all of his abilities, instead of increasing the damage of your physical strikes, they add additional damage on top of them. I'm talking about Doom and I'm talking about Blade Rifts. Now, Doom just adds a flat attack that triggers after a second after you strike an enemy with the Doom attack, and then Blade Rifts create a little AoE that deals damage 10 times per second to any enemy caught within them. Now, both abilities are pretty solid, and he has dedicated boons for both of them, which we'll go over very shortly. I really like Doom thematically. I find that it's usually strong enough when you first take it to get you through the first and second levels, and Blade Rifts is probably the single strongest cast in the game when it comes to melting bosses and killing bosses, especially since it's also available on his dash and his call, so anytime that you take a Blade Rift buff, you can potentially be buffing 3 different abilities. Now, Doom only has 2 dedicated buffs, but they're very strong, as we are now going to start going over. So to start our examination of Ares' boons here, we're just going to go through the wiki page. Now, as we can see here, Doom is applied by both his basic and his special attack. It does do a little bit more damage on the special attack at the lower rarities, but the basic attack is also good. The key is that you want to take Doom on the correct attack, which is going to be some sort of AoE or penetrating attack, so you can hit multiple enemies at once. Now, without taking the correct boon, there's no point in hitting an enemy more than once with Doom, so you usually want it on slower attacks as well. I like it on the Stygius Nova Smash, or throwing the Varatha Spear I think is a pretty solid way to apply Doom, and you have your basic attack to back it up. Now then we scroll down a little bit here, and we see that we've got all of our Blade Rift abilities of Slicing Shot, Blade Dash, and Ares Aid. We can see that they only do a small amount of damage per tick, but as I mentioned in the introduction, each of these applies this damage 10 times per second, which is very good. So any enemy caught within them can potentially take 40 times this damage if they're within it for the entire duration, which is quite significant. So you could do 440 damage with a simple rare Slicing Shot and no other buffs on top of it. Now, I do think that the Blade Dash is a little bit disappointing because it's what I would phrase as a defensively focused dash, in that it creates the Blade Rift effect where you start your dash as opposed to where you end your dash, so it's very hard to actually use it offensively. It's more like, oh, I dodged out of the way of a melee guy, and now he's going to take 30 damage or so while he recovers from his swing. But if you're already into Blade Rifts, it's not a bad idea to grab Blade Dash because it's going to benefit from all of your buff boons. And then we have Ares Aid here, which I think is probably the single best boss killing call in the game, because not only does it do an average of 37.5 damage 10 times a second, you can actually direct it because you become the Blade Rift and you move around. And while you're the Blade Rift, you're also invulnerable to damage. So it's powerful as a defensive tool and very powerful as an offensive tool as well. And again, benefits from all your boons. With Ares Aid, either epic or rare, and a couple buffs, and knowing what abilities to take to increase the damage of your magic-based attacks, you can easily do over 3,000 damage with a single fully charged call to the final boss, which is excellent. Very, very helpful, especially, again, since you're invulnerable for that duration. You're not going to have anything to fear from him. And then we come to Curse of Vengeance here. This is the other way that you can inflict doom on your enemies other than your basic and special attack. I don't really like this because all of these revenge boons, with the exception of Athena's boon, have a very small area of effect around you when you are hit. So unless you are being pounded by melee guys, you're not actually going to apply doom or any of the other effects to the enemy. If you're shot by a ranged attack, they don't care if you have Curse of Vengeance, it's not going to do very much. But it does do a decent amount. It's a little bit higher than the other two doom applications, as you can see here. but overall, I don't consider it very good. It's probably mid-tier. So now we start getting into some of the more general buffs here for a little bit. We've got Urge to Kill. I don't like Urge to Kill. If we look at the bonuses here, it's 10%, 12%. It's pretty much nothing. It's pretty much nothing, and it only actually applies to your attack and your cast. So since there's a difference between magic damage and physical damage, the attack specifically is physical damage. So this isn't actually going to make your Doom do any additional damage. It'll make your Blade Rift do a little bit more damage, but 10% increase is only an average of maybe 1 more damage per tick. So it's not so great, and I don't think it scales well with any other abilities either. It's just too small of a buff. You're never gonna notice it when you take it. So I don't take this unless there's nothing else on offer, and it's better than taking something I'm never gonna use. Then we have Battle Rage. I initially really didn't like Battle Rage, but it's definitely grown on me as I've played with it creating this guide, because this 150 or 200% bonus damage after you kill an enemy is really, really strong for clearing rooms. If you get a strong cast such as Poseidon's cast, where you have a weapon that just has a really heavy attack, this makes it really easy to clear rooms, and a lot of the later game rooms have very weak enemies as well that you can very easily proc this off of and then take down the tougher enemies. So I actually really like Battle Rage now. I don't think it's a must take for me, but if there's nothing else there, I like Battle Rage. Then we have Blood Frenzy. This is an interesting one that I've been playing around with. It doesn't show here on the website, but it's an average of 10, 15, and 20% damage bonus when you use Death Defiance, which I've been playing around with Stubborn Defiance because it's a flat damage bonus, which means it does actually affect your magic damage. So in a magic build, you can take Blood Frenzy and it'll add 20% damage. So to a Doom effect, which does around 100 damage, as you level it up, you might get to around 200 damage. That's gonna do another 40 damage or so per cast without taking any other dedicated boons for it. And it works on all of your attacks. So I think it's okay. I don't like it that it has to be triggered by Death Defiance, but it's a solid choice as well. That brings us to our Black Metal and Engulfing Vortex. These are our 2 basic Blade Rift increases here, and they're both really, really good. Black Metal just makes the AoE bigger, and you can level up Black Metal as well and create even bigger radiuses of effect, because the regular radius, as we're going to see a little bit later, of Black Metal of Blade Rift is relatively small, and it moves forward at a dedicated speed, so it can be a little bit hard to keep enemies in there to continuously apply the damage ticks to them. Well, if it's bigger, they're gonna naturally have more of it pass through them, which means they'll be in it for longer, and it makes it easier to hit more enemies at once. So I really like Black Metal, and then Engulfing Vortex, I think, is way better than Black Metal, and Black Metal is already good. Engulfing Vortex makes so your Blade Rift lasts a little bit longer, but more importantly, pulls your foes in. So earlier on in this video, I mentioned that Ares doesn't have any way to actually defend Zagreus. All of his boons are focused around attack. This one is sort of like a soft defense, because when you fire a Blade Rift through an enemy, it's going to pull them along with it. So it keeps melee enemies away from you, and it's going to do enough damage to kill most ranged enemies pretty quickly as well. And again, if you jump right into an enemy's face and you throw 3 Blade Rifts into his face with a leveled up Infernal Soul, they're going to be hit by the full duration of 3 Blade Rifts, and there's not many enemies in the game that can survive that. Then we have our 2 dedicated Doom buffs here. Dire Misfortune here, which every time that you hit an enemy with a Doom ability after applying Doom to them, you stack base damage of the curse on top of them. Now, I think this is okay. If you look at the actual amount here, it's not very much. It's 10 or it's 7.5. So I think this is probably not a fantastic boon to take, especially since, as I mentioned earlier, the way that Doom works, you're usually going to want to take it on a slower attack to start with, so it's really hard to build up these stacks. But I will note that it is base damage, so this scales off of any other magic damage buffs that you are picking up, so it does actually add up a little bit deceptively. Where this is good is if you have a weapon such as the Adamant Rail and you've taken Doom on your grenade shot, and then you pick up Dire Misfortune and later on you get offered a Doom basic attack, then we're cooking with gas. Then that's a solid option. But that's a pretty rare case, so overall, it's nice to have. I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think you're going to get it that often anyway. But then we have Impending Doom. Impending Doom is awesome because it's actually kind of hard to find abilities that are going to increase your magic damage, and Impending Doom just straight up gives you a massive boost to it. This 60, 66, and 72% damage increase, very, very useful. Again, you're probably going to, through power bombs and such, have between 100 to 200 damage base on your Doom, so plus 72% is going to give you another 140 or so damage on top of that, so 300 something damage on your Doom effects. And then if you do have Dire Misfortune, you're going to start seeing more of it come into play because suddenly this 10 damage is actually 17 damage. And it starts to become a lot better. And then we have Ares' Legendary of Vicious Cycle, which stacks onto Blade Rifts, and you read it right here. Your Blade Rift effects deal more damage for each consecutive hit. Damage increase per hit, 1. Now, you might read that and be like, oh, it's just 1 damage per hit. But you gotta remember, a Blade Rift hits 10 times per second, and every single hit adds 1. So you go regular damage plus 1, plus 2, plus 3, plus 4, all the way up to 10, and again, a Blade Rift lasts for 4 seconds by default, so you get 40 stacks of this. And it also works on your call, which can last for about 6 seconds, I believe. So this is how you melt bosses. You launch your Blade Rifts, hopefully you've got Infernal Soul and you can drop 3 of them on them at once. You launch your Blade Rifts and they just stack damage super fast. You build up your call ability and then you just grind them to dust with your call ability. It is excellent, like most legendary abilities, and it does actually pop up fairly often. So if you're having trouble with the boss and you're focusing on taking Blade Rifts, you can probably expect to find Vicious Cycle, which it's a legendary ability. You should take it if you have the option to. And now, so we've got all the duo boons down here. I'm not going into duo boons for these particular guides. That's going to be later on. But for now, we've kind of gone through all of his general buffs, all of his different boons, and we see he's got 14 boons to offer us, centered around Doom and Blade Rifts. 2 dedicated boons for Doom, 3 dedicated boons for Blade Rift, and he's got about 3 general buffs, 1, 2, 3, 4 general buffs as well, which I think are pretty middling competitiveness. One of them's okay. But from here, we're going to start talking about boons. But before that, in case you didn't know, my name is Matt. Welcome to the Maximus channel. My goal with this channel is to break down these systems and strategies that are going to help you get good at games faster. Now, right now I'm focusing on Hades because Hades has an awesome endgame, and all of the story and character development comes through playing the game and getting later and later into the games. But it is a little bit complex, so I want to provide an easy in for new players coming in. Now, I've made a whole bunch of Hades beginner guides. You can go ahead and check them out on my channel if you'd like. If you're enjoying this guide, please consider liking and subscribing. And if you have any other questions about how Hades works, the game systems, the story, anything like that, go ahead and leave it in a comment down below and I'll probably answer it in the next video. But now let's move on to builds here. So in our builds here, we're going to talk about how to use Ares and where he kind of fits within the general scheme of your run. Now, I actually think the Ares doesn't make a very good main god. I think he's a lot better as a secondary god. Now, that's mostly because his general buffs, he's got too many of them, and they kind of muck up you trying to get his dedicated buff boons, as well as the fact that Doom doesn't get that much better by taking the dedicated buff boons. Specifically, Dire Misfortune, I think, is just, it's very clunky, it's very hard to use, and doesn't really fit the rest of the motif of Doom. But that does make it so that you can take Doom, and as I've said earlier in this guide a few times, it's strong enough on its own, and it does enough damage on its own that it'll get you through Tartarus and Asphodel, so that you can get stronger boons later, especially if you pick up the Impending Doom, which gives it a huge damage buff. Now, the exception to that is if you take Blade Rifts. I've said it a few times in this guide, but Blade Rifts are phenomenal. If you're having any kind of issue with bosses, they are the cast and just general abilities that you're going to want to take. And they're also very nice for taking out smaller rooms of enemies. They are very effective at taking down enemies as well, especially if you get the boon that's going to keep gonna pull enemies into the middle of them so you can apply that damage really consistently and help push enemies away from you. So I've got 3 builds here that I've played through that I want to show you guys as examples of how to use Ares. So the first one we're going to go through here is actually a Dio main, but you'll see I pick up Doom early on and use it to get me to the point where Dionysus is strong enough to carry me through the rest of the game. And I do actually beat the final boss with this build as well. Okay, so I just want to show you guys how this build progressed as I went through the game. It's only going to take a minute here. We're going to quickly show you a fight from Tartarus, Asphodel, Elysium, and the Temple of Styx, and we're going to quickly talk about the boons I've taken at each stage. So this is very early on, and you can see I've picked up a common Doom Flourish. I also have a lunge boost from Chaos. I've also got Ravenous Will from Demeter, and finally I've also got the Curse / Daedalus upgrade. Now the only one that's actually going to directly increase my Doom ability is going to be Ravenous Will, and I think I've got the epic version here, so it should be a 20% increase. So let's see how I play through this and how it goes through the game. So yeah, firing out the cast right away just so I get the bonus damage on my Doom. I'm actually killing most things quick enough that I don't need the Doom effect yet. I'm using the Nemesis Blade, which has the nice crit buff on it after you use special. A little bit later on, but you can see not having too much issue. As soon as we've got one little Doom hit right there, another one over there. Now that there's a lot of enemies on the field, I'm starting to play a lot more hit and run, where I throw out a Doom and I dash away to the next guy and I leave them alone for Doom to kill them. So pretty simple way to actually use Doom here. And now I'm going to pause it here again because now we're going to jump ahead to Asphodel. And I'm going to pick up another Demeter boon here, but let me quickly talk about how the builds progressed. So obviously I didn't have very much in the first one there. I'm going to grab Frozen Touch here. And as soon as this cycle's passed, you're going to see that I also have Trippy Shot, which is Dionysus's cast. I really like Dionysus's cast because it's very strong at taking out rooms of enemies, which is kind of where Doom is a little bit weaker. But let's quickly go through the other boons I've got. You can see I've got a total of 8 now, -1 for the weapon, so I've got a total of 7 now. So I've picked up about 3 more since the last time we saw me. So yeah, same build as before. I have the level 3 common Doom Flourish. I've also got the Trippy Shot cast shot. I just picked up the Frozen Touch. I still have the lunge bonus from Chaos. I still have the Ravenous Will from Demeter, and the new one I've picked up is I've actually picked up an Abyssal Affluence, so I'm going to be earning a little bit more money as we go through this. So now at this stage I've got a cast I can rely on that's going to help keep enemies at bay because Trippy Shot stuns enemies that are within it. So you're going to see I'm going to continue sort of this hit and run style of play as we go through this more elite combat because we just made Artemis upset at us. So yeah, Artemis is not happy. Go through it, she's gonna summon a whole bunch of guys and start shooting at us, and you see I fire out the Trippy Shot right away, keeps the guy into it right there, and here we go. So here's where Doom really shines, is where we get a lot of hit and run gameplay, where I'm just applying Doom and then dashing away. I don't really have any other damage dealing effects that I can throw on enemies right now, so it's better if I jump back and forth and just play it safe here, especially since Asphodel is very hard for the sword because if you get into lava anywhere, it slows you down, and I'm using the Ruthless Dash, which means I've only got a single dash at this point. So I've got to be very careful about how I play this. And yeah, it takes a little bit longer because I'm a little bit low on damage here. I'm really relying on Doom to still pull me through this, so I really need to focus on applying it in order to get the most out of it. And yeah, every now and then I just fire out the Trippy Shot, keeps them off my back, and we should see that in a few seconds here I'll get through this. Now I am using the Skull Earring as well, and I really like the Skull Earring on these magic builds because when you're below 30% health, it's going to give you a 40% boost, which when it comes to Doom, I'm just going to pause this here, when it comes to Doom, that 40% boost is literally 40 or 80 damage depending on what level your Doom's at. Because my Doom is level 3, it's probably about 60 more damage just for being at low health. So this is part of knowing your two damage types of physical versus magic and prioritizing which one you're going to focus on. Okay, so we got one more main clip to go through, and then we're going to show you how the build came together. Again, I'm focusing on doing magic damage here. I'm just going to pause this here. Focusing on doing magic damage, so trying to pick boons that are increasing magic damage. I'm into Dionysus and Ares here. Dionysus' hangover effect and cast is also magic damage, so it's very important that I focus on that as opposed to, your attack does 79% additional damage or something like that. So at this point, we're a little bit further along. You can see I've picked up an epic drunken strike, which is very good. It's going to round out my damage curve on my basic attack. I've picked up a rare Ares Artemis Call as well. I really like Artemis Call, and what's really good about it is it's very high burst damage, and it has a chance to crit, so all of your magic buffs are also going to be very effective on that as well. So let's just quickly take a look at the other boons that I've gone here. It looks like we've gone about 3 more. So at this point, other than what you see, we've actually only added a Curse Slash and a second wind from Hermes to this build, so it's very similar to what we had before other than the Drunken Strike and the Call. But you're going to see in this fight that it's much more well-rounded. I'm able to kill the enemies much faster because I've really tried to focus on upping my magic damage, as I've been saying. But let's see how this goes. It looks like a lot of chariots are coming in. Again, I'm using the trippy shot just to stun them, give me a little bit of breathing room, and help me apply Doom a few times, as well as applying my hangover. You can see these guys are going down really fast now at this point. A couple more guys spawning in, and yeah, at this point the build's pretty well on its way. I don't really need anything else for it. I want to be focusing now on increasing the damage further, maybe fill out my dash, and there we go. So much faster now that I've got higher abilities to play around with. Okay, so here we are at the final stage of this build, and I'm showing you guys the tiny vermin because I really like the tiny vermin fight as an example of how you're going to do against the final boss. And you can see I've actually traded my Doom special attack out for a Frost special attack, which is what I meant by using Ares as a support god and why I'm showing you this clip despite me not actually having any Ares boons at this point. See, Doom was strong enough that it got me all the way to this point, to this fight, because I wasn't finding anything else. And now I've got a very strong Dionysus build going on, and I've got access to Chill as well, which is going to make it very easy to keep privilege status on enemies. So this is an extremely strong build, and it was actually so good I was able to beat the final boss without too much issue. So again, Ares is probably best as a secondary god, at least when you're taking his Doom effects. Okay, so this one's a little bit of a treat for you guys because I actually filmed this while I was creating the more detailed Let's Play guide for this guide. And in this one, I'm just going to let it play here, I actually specifically built just Doom. Now you can see that means I've got 5 levels into an epic Doom special flourish on my spear. Now I didn't really want to do that, but the game rando was very strange where I only got power palms for the first little bit. I got way fewer boons than I would normally get in a run here, but I also got very lucky in that I picked up the 2 Doom boons from Ares very early on, and I also picked up the Curse of Longing from whatever the duo boon is with Aphrodite that inflicts your Doom multiple times over its duration. So I have a very strong Doom here, and if you pay attention, I'm actually doing 200 something damage without many buffs on the enemies from my Doom strikes, which is very powerful. And if you go through and you watch the Let's Play, by the time I get to the final boss, my Doom is doing 500 something damage to the boss. So very strong, very weird luck in that run. And so our final build here is just going to be going through Blade Rift. Now, you can see that in this fight I've only got Blade Rift. My only other ability is I've picked up an explosive uppercut for the fists here. So this is just rare Blade Rift you see doing damage to these guys. And I'm just focusing on firing it out, and then you'll see I try and stay in the Blade Rift when I'm fighting. That means that the enemy, if they want to come close to me, they're gonna be damaged, and it gives you a little bit of protection. And you can see I melted those guys. Normally those guys take a little bit longer to kill. And so here's Asphodel. We're a little bit later on. I've got the I've got the Engulfing Vortex Boon here, as well as you can see I've got a couple of Athena boons, and this is exactly what I want when I have a Blade Rift build, because I've got Athena for defense, and you can see I'm pulling the enemies along there with Blade Rifts, and then Blade Rift is really carrying most of my damage through this. And I specifically took Infernal Soul, that's the additional 2 casts you're going to get, because I knew I was going to be trying to get Blade Rifts, and I think that because Blade Rift is sort of a damage over time, it's a lot better to get 3 of them out at once rather than 1 every 3 seconds. And the fact that it doesn't stick in the enemy means that it's very easy for you to go and pick up after it's done doing its damage. So you can see, fought through Asphodel, no issue, and I go through the rest of the level with no issue either. Now, because Blade Rift is so good, I wanted to show you guys it against a boss, because bosses are where it really shines. And you're going to see I'm just dodging around. I haven't added too much. I've got Ares Call here, so you're going to see me use that a little bit to do some additional damage here. And I did actually pick up the Vicious Cycle as well. So you're going to see a lot of damage coming out of these Blade Rifts. Like right there, that Blade Rift just did 300, 400 damage to Asterius, and my Call just did 500 damage to him. So very, very powerful at taking down enemies, and because it's a cast, I'm not really in very much danger. You can see that I've taken a little bit of damage, but nothing too high pressure at this point. And the best part about Blade Rift, especially when you're fighting Theseus and Asterius and some of the other Elysium enemies, is that shield can't block it. You do damage through shields, which is very, very handy, very, very nice. So my focus here is just to dash around and pick up my Bloodstones whenever possible, and then throw it in the face of the enemy and sort of just get some cheap shots in whenever I can. So this is a very effective build, and with this Blade Rift build, I was actually able to go and kill the final boss pretty easily. In fact, that number I quoted you earlier about with his Call doing about 3,000 damage to the boss is this run, because I was able to get the Vicious Cycle, and you get a fully charged right there Call, using Call to kill Theseus, and you just melt bosses. So you can see I haven't even used 1 Death Defiance. I think they've done somewhere around 100 damage to me at this point. And now that it's just the Minotaur, his attacks are pretty easy to dodge, and I just drop Blade Rifts on him and mess around. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the Blade Rifts. So how good is Ares overall? I've said it a few times in this video, and I think that Ares is actually best as a secondary god. I don't think that his abilities really stack on themselves effectively enough to make him a really good main, specifically with Doom. Dire Misfortune is just sort of a clunky boon to try and take advantage of if you really want to go the Doom route. On the other hand though, if you do go for his Blade Rifts, he is an excellent god to main, but of course you need to pair him with a strong basic attack and special attack at the same time then. I also think that his general buffs set him back as well, because they're really middling, and he's got 3 of them, and because his abilities are split between 2 different types, it's really hard to actually get the boons that you want when you're maining him. You have to pick a lot of Ares boons to really get good effect out of it. And for that reason, I think he's best as a secondary god overall. Blade Rift is, again, fantastic, but I think that Doom is good enough to get you through the first 2 levels, so you want to take him on other gods that are going to take a little bit longer to build up and get really effective, and then he really shines. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some of you out there really like maining Ares. Let me know in the comments down below. How do you like to build him? Who do you like to combo with? Help educate other people who are coming to learn about Hades and help them reach the end game. Thank you for watching this video, you guys. I hope that you found it valuable. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing down below. I make a whole ton of Hades guides, so check them out as well. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And once again, thank you for your support. And remember, there is no escape.